Great, Ans.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Coffee Talk TBSC. So this morning we will be discussing the importance of Microsoft 365 compliance. And today we have myself, I'm Madison Miller. I'm the marketing coordinator of the Business Software Center. And we also have Phil Hames with me and May Turnbull from EasySAM. And EasySAM is an independent specialist in software auditing and software asset management. So they're very knowledgeable when it comes to Microsoft compliance. So stay tuned and see what we have in store for you on how to get you prepared for these audits. Just keep in mind that we do have a hashtag Coffee Talk TBSC. Feel free to share that on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or even YouTube. And we can have a conversation through social media. You can tell us how we did today, if this helped you or not. And we will also be posting this video on our YouTube channel. So if you need to dip in and out of this call, no worries. This will be pre-recorded and put on YouTube for you. So the first thing to ask ourselves is, what is software compliance? Is it something that's really important to think about? I don't think many people even really worry about it too much, just because it's become an everyday routine. You know, we purchase software and we follow the licensing terms and conditions, right? Well, turns out not that many people know exactly what they're paying for, or how to use these licenses that they purchase. So the first question you want to ask yourself for software compliance is, what are you legally entitled to use? So essentially, if you're a business and you're buying a whole bunch of licenses for software, it's better to track your inventory during this, just so you know what's going on and how much you can use versus how much you don't have the entitlement to use. So with software compliance, there's oftentimes audits that are involved. Some businesses may be lucky and never have to deal with an audit, but the audits are performed by many software companies as an effort to reduce piracy and abuse for their software. So during these audits, you are required to have the correct licenses for each device. That's why it's important to track your inventory. And then with software compliance, the really good thing about this is it helps run on the correct version of the software. So with the current software that you have, it provides the updates for you, especially software in the cloud. It automatically does these updates for you. But that also enhances the security and reduces the bugs for the software, and also creates faster performance for you as well. So more specifically with Microsoft Office 365 and compliance, their whole compliance process is very formal, and it's usually mandatory compliance review. I know that in a lot of their terms and agreements, it shows that they can do audits at least once every year. And so whenever they do these audits, they often give a 30 days notice, and with their audits, oftentimes there are certain triggers that make them question your software licensing. Oftentimes this includes having business growth or having business changes. I do want to just add right here, if you have any questions or answers, please feel free to put them in the comments section. We will have a questions and answers time in the middle and then at the end, but feel free to just put in any questions that you have. We do have Phil and May here that can answer your Microsoft 365 audit questions. So continuing on, Microsoft 365 audit process. So the process is very, very formal, like I said before. You receive a formal notification letter, and verifications are executed by independent accounting firms. And so the audit time varies depending on the IT structure. So if you're a smaller business, it might be a lot faster for them to go through these audits. And if you're a larger business, it might take a few days. And then you receive a compliance or non-compliance notification at the end of the audit process. Now, actions for non-compliance. So say that your business isn't following the terms and conditions that you signed up for with your Microsoft licenses. If you're non-compliant, they do give you the opportunity to rectify the situation. Microsoft does provide more information on this on their website. I have the link down there, the docs link. So you can see the actions for non-compliance, what you can do to help rectify the situation. But the top 3 things that you can do is remotely lock the non-compliant device. So that means simply just locking it and not using the device. That way you're not using the license, the illegal software that you have on the device. You can retire the non-compliant device, or you can also send a push notification to the end user, just letting them know, hey, this device is non-compliant, we really need to not be using this software, or we can purchase the software to ensure that we get you back in compliance. So there are penalties for licensing violations with Microsoft 365. The 3 top penalties, the most common one I should say, is the back payments. Of course, if you're using many licenses that you haven't purchased, they will require you to pay them back, the licenses that you didn't pay in the first place. But on top of that, they might also have additional fines. Now, this is also part of the terms and conditions that you sign whenever you acquire these software licenses. So oftentimes they might ask you for additional fees just to cover violating the terms and conditions. And then worst case scenario is court hearings for stolen licenses. So that's always something that you want to watch out for. That's never a good thing to go to court for software licenses, especially because this is something so easy and so avoidable, especially if you're taking the time to track and monitor your software. So as I said before, we do have questions and answers section open, so feel free to leave your questions in the comments box and either Phil or May can answer these questions for you. I'm going to exit my screen just to see if there's any questions popping up here. Let me see here. Okay, so I do have a question. It says, audit trigger business growth or change. How are Microsoft defining this? Do they monitor activity and usage of 365? May or Phil, can you elaborate on that one?
Hi guys, it's May from EasySAM. So I'm happy, Phil, if you are, to take on the question. So in terms of sort of the triggers for Microsoft audits, and obviously you mentioned two of the big ones, so growth or change, and I think the most important part here is to sort of elaborate a little bit on that. So your growth or change will not necessarily trigger an audit. However, if you have growth or change where Microsoft do not see the corresponding growth in license reservations or requirements, that may sort of trigger an audit. However, if you have had a merge or an amalgamation where obviously Microsoft can see that there has been an increase in reservations or a true up of license requirements, I think you are pretty safe. You just need to watch out for large changes in your environment that Microsoft might be aware of, where the corresponding license requirement or commitment hasn't changed alongside that.
Yeah, I think that's really important to know. I think that understanding the triggering can definitely help get you better prepared for the auditing process. Feel free to leave any more of your questions in the comments box. I don't see any more popping up at this time. Here we go. I see a general question. Is Microsoft SAM review mandatory? May or Phil, do you want to elaborate on that one maybe?
Hi, Madison. Yes. So you'll find that in the terms and conditions that you sign alongside the various volume licensing agreements that you have actually already agreed to fulfill an audit requirement should Microsoft deem it necessary. So it is very much compulsory.
Okay, thank you. I also agree with that. It's definitely in the terms and conditions, so you need to follow it up. And then we do have another question as well, sorry. It says, what is a software true up? I don't know if we covered that at all.
Okay, so if you've licensed your Office 365 through one of the commitment programs like an enterprise agreement, it allows you to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of placing your license, shall we say, orders on an annual basis. So once a year over the 3-year program, you'll be required to submit a true up, which will basically tell Microsoft what has changed over the year and what your new requirements are in terms of your Office 365 programs.
Yep, exactly. Thank you for covering that for me. We're going to go ahead and continue on with the presentation. I hope that was able to elaborate a bit more. If you need any more clarification on these questions, you can always email us at sales@businesssoftwarecenter.com. Or of course, you can use the hashtag CoffeeTalkTBSC and we will get back to you. We do have more time at the end for questions and answers, so we're going to just go ahead and push through some of this presentation and get back to your questions soon. So I compiled a list of different ways we can help how to stay compliant with Microsoft 365. So this is just a bit of our advice on how to stay compliant. So as we discussed before, business change often can cause a audit trigger. So if you're a small business in particular, it's better to understand that this may cause a trigger. So small businesses can grow rapidly, and as you grow, you might need to purchase more licenses. And I would say that maybe perhaps consider going to the cloud. That way you can do the month-to-month subscriptions and you can flex your subscribers up or down. I would say if you're a small business, it might be better to do a CSP licensing rather than EA. So the next piece of advice that we have is avoid time-consuming and manual tasks. So this involves staying organized for sure, simply because audits are very daunting and they take up a lot of time. So by staying organized, keeping records, and understanding your agreements, it really helps make the process as smooth as possible. It gives you more of an advantage, so you know exactly what you're getting yourself into rather than being surprised at the end of the audit with a big fat fine. So there is compliance monitoring software out there. Here at TBSC, we do offer Smarter 365, which we call the quick, efficient, and cost-effective smarter software management. So Smarter 365 can help track and monitor your Microsoft 365 licenses, help track and monitor your usage, and help ensure you're staying compliant along the way. So our third piece of advice would be understanding different licenses for Microsoft 365. So as I said earlier about EA and CSP, we will go into that in a bit more detail here. Tech and legal terms may be very confusing. Certain examples of misinterpretations would be misinterpreting license-related definitions, or another example of confusion might be involved with upgraded or downgraded your software without understanding the product user rights implications. So there really is a lot that goes into these terms and conditions. So you're always welcome to contact a SAM professional to help go over these with you. And like I said before, it's very important to understand these different licenses. So if you're signing up for an EA, which is an enterprise agreement, oftentimes this is a locked-in contract. So typically these, I would say they last about 3 years, but I'm sure May could help us understand these a bit more. Whereas with CSP, like I said before, is a month-to-month subscription. So I would say it's a lot more flexible using cloud subscriptions, just because if you have I would say employees coming in and out. Maybe you hire on freelancers. You can, hire a freelancer, get them a license, and then drop their license whenever you no longer need their service. So I would say understanding your licenses is definitely a big way of avoiding any audit disasters. And I would say the fourth piece of advice that we have for you is knowing your limits. So especially with enterprise agreements, I would say knowing your limits is hugely important, just because it's a legal negotiation. So you need to know the limit that you have on your contract. We advise that if you have a limit that you can't go past, you should reharvest these licenses when necessary. And like I said before, our Smarter 365 does help track and monitor software, but it also helps with reharvesting as well. So this simply means just taking an unused license and reapplying it to some other place that actually needs the license. That way, you're not reaching your limits. And then, like I said before, you should track your usage to ensure that you're not going over your limits to have any really bad audits from Microsoft. And then I have, for our fifth piece of advice, migrating to the cloud. I did mention this earlier, but on-prem is very limiting. It often makes you responsible for your own maintenance. You know, as I said before, doing the CSP route is nice because it does all the software updates for you automatically, which gives you faster speed and also provides security. When you migrate to the cloud, it just gives you a nice inventory of what you're using and what you're not using. So you can get rid of these unused apps that you're not currently using on your desktop. It allows you to run the latest apps. And then you can increase your SaaS usage, and the cloud does offer flexibility and reliability with the cloud. With the examples I've provided before, it's really nice that it gives you the flexibility of adding or subtracting your users and your licenses month to month. So how can TBSC help you? Well, we do have Smarter 365, which is a form of license tracking. It's a way of preventative maintenance, so it prevents having really bad audits in the future. It monitors your installs, it monitors your usage, and it also helps address training needs. So with the usage, if you notice through our software that some of your employees aren't using Teams, for instance, we can offer you training advice and say, hey, maybe they need more training to up their Teams usage. And what's nice about us is we can help you virtually, especially in this current climate. And our Smarter 365 is quick, efficient, and cost-effective. So I believe that we are going to step into a demo now. So I'm going to pass off the presentation to Phil, and he can go ahead and present our Smarter 365.
So hello everyone. Yeah, what I'm going to do is just show you some examples. So these are the principles that we would look at. And as Madison mentioned, there are a couple of ways to look at compliance. One is where you've got a volume agreement, such as an enterprise agreement. You're wanting to keep within your maximum amount. And a good way to do this is really where the principle that we're looking at is whether you've got any unused licenses that you can keep reharvesting so that you keep within that minimum. Particularly if you've got a high turnover of staff, you're wanting to make sure that you always keep within that maximum amount. And here we can see this button reharvest, and the same principles would always apply whichever way you're going to do it. You want to look and see that people are inactive, and you then specify, you've already specified, say they're inactive for the last 60 or 90 days or something. So we're just pulling that data and making it easy to look at. You'll notice here we've got anonymized codes. Normally you would have their email addresses in here. So it's a fairly simple process just to click and send an email out and say, we notice that you're not using it. We're going to reharvest your license if you've not, if you aren't using it, and then ask for people to respond. And you can also compare against HR records for people who've left the organization. It's important not just for compliance, but also for your security. You don't want people leaving the organization but still having access to their SaaS applications. So that's one of the key things to keep within your maximum. But the other thing that we're doing, and you should do, is really look at surpluses. Now, in this case, you'll see it's 0 because this particular example is on a CSP license, the month-to-month license. So there's no surplus and there's no negative in here. If you were on a volume license like an EA, you might find that you've got a negative or a plus on there. Plus basically means you've got spare licenses, so they're in your store cupboard that you can allocate out. And a minus would mean that you have gone over in that case. So you're always aiming to be at a 0. Now it's quite difficult to do that, but if I just quickly show you an example of how we would check on that. Here we can see a breakdown of an enterprise agreement, and we can see the number that have been purchased and deployed. If I quickly just look at the analysis, we can see here that basically this organization, although they were within their minimum, they had a lot of inactive products. So they theoretically they were compliant, but they were wasting a lot of money. And if they'd have been on a month-to-month basis, like a CSP, they would have saved themselves about £50,000 over the year. So compliance is a two-edged sword. It's, are you over compliant or are you under compliant? So it's one thing to think about on those contracts where you're locked in. There's another element that I just want to show you that we usually would say you need to check for on a regular basis, and that is where you're taking some of the apps that are downloaded, say for instance like the Office apps. Are you over installing those? If they're the online apps, you have to have the subscription in order to access them, but once you've downloaded, then you need to have a check. And in this case, we've got a good example here. We've only got one of the users who's marked in red, but we can see that this user has got over 5 installations, and it's saying the user count over 5 is 1. But if you actually have a look, then they're not over 5 on any particular type of device, which in most cases is going to be, I think, acceptable within their licensing agreements. However, in many cases, we're finding a different situation. So I can just click and show you an example here. And I've not shown any exact user details, but you can see here we've got situations of people that have over installed in Windows devices, and in some cases we're seeing hundreds of users that have over installed their downloaded apps in particular cases. So even on a month-to-month contract where they've got enough subscriptions, they can be in a situation where they're over installing on their local devices. So this is something that really you need to keep an eye on a regular basis, and just make sure that users are not going out of the normal compliance rules. So that's a quick overview. I'm going to hand back to Madison now, and if anyone's got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen. And let me see if we have any questions coming in the questions box. Yes, we do. So here's a question. In these COVID days, with the use of more home working, will Microsoft be more alert for under licensing? Do you have any idea about that, May?
So certainly I don't think it's going to heighten their alert for under licensing, but I think it's probably worth warning or alerting people that even with the COVID situation and the sort of inconvenience that it's put on businesses, that Microsoft have certainly not stepped down their audit requirements or requests. I've had a number of customers, certainly right at the beginning of the pandemic in March, April time, still being approached by Microsoft to do either audits or self-assessments or collaborative engagements. So don't think that because of the current times that you're any less likely to receive that letter from Microsoft.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, especially with this whole change in the workforce. I guess a lot of things are uncertain, but I feel like it's the same way with Microsoft. It's not going to change or trigger an audit just because there's been such an influx of remote workers. You know, licenses are going to be the same. I don't think terms and conditions can necessarily change that fast. you know, with this climate and everything like that. So yeah, I would say you're definitely safe from, I guess you'll just be treated as normal, you know, it won't trigger anything.
Yes,
So
exactly.
do I have any other questions coming in? I don't see any additional questions. Okay, I'm going to just leave the questions and answers open for the next few minutes. If you have any additional questions, please pop them in the questions box. In the meantime, Phil or May, if you want to give any examples of any audits you've performed in the past, or I'm sorry, software inventory that you helped perform to avoid any really bad audits, you can go ahead and tell us your stories.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is important to think about is how you use the flexibility of licensing to keep compliant. And one of the things that I think, as you mentioned before, Madison, is in many organizations there are temporary staff or contract staff coming on, and it may be seasonal workers. And there, what people may find better to do is have, if it's a larger enterprise, to have something like an enterprise agreement for their core staff, and then take out a CSP in parallel for that flexibility to add and close down users as they need to. So that gives the flexibility of both, and it also allows them to have the volume licensing agreement for their core staff. There's another element that you might want to think about is even on a CSP flexible contract, is to look at changes in the business and constantly keep abreast of those changes and reflect those in your subscriptions. Having a flexible contract where you don't reharvest your licenses just means you'll have lots and lots of unused licenses that you're still paying for. So you may be compliant from a Microsoft point of view in that you're paying for everything that you've got access to, but they're still unused, and that's a bad form of non-compliance for the business because you're wasting money. So there are a few principles. The other thing is, in these days, you know, there's a lot of organizations changing, and in many cases organizations are downsizing, and that means they're going to really have to look at what they need going forward and have a handle on what they're using and not using so that they can make the best decisions. So I think it's important to do these things and to plan for how businesses have to change for the future.
Thanks.
Oh, go ahead, May. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of give it some general advice around software audits. As a Microsoft Gold partner, EasySAM obviously have worked on hundreds of engagements with customers on behalf of Microsoft, and I have to just say that even the most mature SAM environment where you think you're on top of your SAM, I can guarantee you that 100% of the time when we came in with sort of the Microsoft hat on, we always found things to surprise people. And I think when it comes to Office 365, people sort of take it for granted that it's so easy to stay in compliance with the new cloud models, that they miss important things, like things that can't be monitored by tools, or things that are difficult to be extracted from the Office 365 tenant. And that's why obviously EasySAM works so closely with the Smarter 365 technology, because those of you on the call that have tried to build your own Power BI scripts to try and extract the kind of information you're wanting, you'll know how difficult it is and how cloudy that water can become if you don't have the right intel from Microsoft. And obviously Smarter 365 work really closely with Microsoft to make sure that the inactivity usage and all that good stuff that's reporting to you in the tool is bona fide. I've had customers that have run Power BI scripts and they've pulled the wrong field and you know, caused a huge headache for themselves. So 100% of the time, guys, don't take for granted that you're compliant. Use tools like Smarter 365 to validate your compliance, and yeah, just be ever alert to the changing environments, like Phil said.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, May, that if, we come across cases where people are using tools, but the tools have not been approved by Microsoft, which is why we felt it was important to get the Microsoft ISV approval. And Microsoft have checked and validated our technology. So I would always say, don't just take it for granted that your data is going to be accurate on checking these things, because there's a lot of tools out there that have probably not been designed in the right way, or as you say, not picking up the right fields.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's been such a really fun experience working with Microsoft and getting this product in tip-top shape for preparing everyone for taking inventory of their software, understanding their usage. So I would say at this time, it's 30 minutes is here and gone. So we're going to go ahead and finish up this call. Like I said before, if you have any questions, you can always get in contact with us through the hashtag CoffeeTalkTBSC. We can answer your questions on social media. You're more than welcome to email us at sales@businesssoftwarecenter.com. Feel free to join us for our next Coffee Talk. It is in 2 weeks' time, so August 7th at 10:30 a.m. London time. And the topic we'll be covering is Zoom versus Teams, which is better for your business. Right now in this climate, we're seeing a lot of battling between Teams and Zoom and Skype and Google. So we'll go ahead and go over some of the key features of Zoom and Teams and which one might be better for your business. Like I said, also our video will be posted on YouTube, so feel free to follow us on YouTube at TBSC. And this video, along with all of our previous other coffee talks, are in a playlist, so you can go ahead and watch them at your own leisure. I just want to thank Phil and May for joining me on the call today. We learned a lot of new things. I hope that this was helpful for everybody. And as always, it was a pleasure doing this coffee talk. All right, everyone, have a very good morning.